Just 5 more races to go now of the 2017 FF1M Championship, and it's the last race in Europe because we're in Portugal for round 14, which takes place at the Portimao circuit, right at the southern tip of Portugal. And it's basically a foregone conclusion now in the championship battle because Tornado hold, wait for it, a 98-point lead in the team's championship over their nearest, I say rivals, but not really, Mitchell. They could have wrapped it up a race early last time out at Monza. They did score that 1-2 finish that was predicted in the pre-race predictions, but only Sebastian Vettel finishing 6th prevented Tornado from doing so. But Mitchell's job is pretty clear and pretty impossible. 1-2s in the remaining 5 races and pray that Tornado don't score more than 2 points. That's not going to happen. Although Portugal is a bit of a cursed race for Tornado actually. In 7 attempts, they have not had a single win or a podium. The best they've managed are a couple of 5th places. They came courtesy of Jean-Eric Vergne in 2014, that was at Estoril, and 1988 also at Estoril courtesy of Nelson Piquet. And fun fact, during the 1988 season, Tornado were running Megatron engines. That's madness if you think about the engines that we use these days. Here's a look at the circuit. And it goes up and down as well as left and right. There's some nice elevation in this one. It's a pretty alien circuit compared to some of the others that we visit. Only had one previous race here, and that was last season. That was won by Lewis Hamilton, who used his 2-stop strategy pretty well to gain track position. Although he did inherit the win late on when Nico Hülkenberg, who was 3-stopping and driving the race of his career, tragically broke down with a few laps to go thanks to a gearbox problem. Like last season, we're expecting 2 or 3 stops once again in this 65-lap race. Last time out at Monza, we had Lewis Hamilton on pole position, but he languished in that race down to 9th place. Apparently his 1-stop strategy pitted quite early for that, and his tyres were pretty old, but it was a bit of a qualifying heavy setup that he ran last time out at Monza. This time round he looks to have done the same thing because he has pole position, his 36th of his career. The gap was 3/10 over Väinö Kymmenen, championship leader Väinö Kymmenen. Fernando Alonso, who crashed out and probably threw away a race win at Monza, starts 3rd ahead of Romain Grosjean. Then it's an all-Andrew row 3 with Daniel Ricciardo 5th ahead of Jean-Eric Vergne. Vergne, remember, doesn't have a drive next season. Cooper Lee is up in 7th, which is pretty decent for that dog of a Pedersen car that he has this season, and James Clark will start 8th in the AJ. Valtteri Bottas starts 9th in the GRM ahead of Carlos Sainz. Those two collided last time out. Well, it was Sainz that ran wide at the second Lesmo, and then Bottas carelessly collected him. Sainz continued, but then later retired with transmission problems. Bryant will start 11th ahead of Sebastian Vettel 12th, then Sergio Perez 13th ahead of Thomas Gonzalez in 14th. Kevin Magnussen down in 15th, and FJR have basically turned the engines off for the remainder of the season. More on that a little bit later, but alongside Magnussen is Max Verstappen. Kimi Räikkönen was on the podium last time out at Monza. Good effort, there's still life in the old dog yet. And alongside him is Caterina Caracciola. Räikkönen and Caracciola collided at Austria. On Olga Gira, row 10, Farina ahead of Hülkenberg, who had probably the worst incident last time out at Monza when he just ran completely off the road at Ascari and crashed into Stoffel van Dorn upon rejoining. That was a bad one. Poor Stoffel. Stoffel will start last, and Alfonsi will start 21st. So here we go. 5 lights are on, and the 5 lights go out, and it's a bit of a long shot, but let's see who gets the best start. It looks as if Väinö Kymmenen has got up alongside Lewis Hamilton going into the first corner, that's Primera corner, and second Fernando Alonso can he take it? But Hamilton going right round the outside. That quicker outside line is better than that acute inside line. So he maintains the lead from pole position, but let's see if he has taken a qualifying heavy setup and if Väinö Kymmenen, who did top the Sunday warm-up session, will be on him straight away, and that's pretty clear as, look at that, Grosjean has lost a place to Ricciardo. Where's Jean-Eric Vergne gone? He's had a terrible start. He is down to 11th from 6th on the grid. We can see James Clark up in 6th, Lee 7th and Bottas 8th. And Bryant has gained a couple of positions as well, so decent start from that particular shake and bake. And there you can see Väinö Kymmenen right up Hamilton's 6 as we go through the first lap. And when will Kymmenen make his attack rather than if? Will surely be on the second lap of the race. Let's see what happens as we go through Sagres corner, which is the final proper corner because this last corner gallop is flat out. And it's a long right-hander, and you stay tight if you want to go into the pits, but we're not at the moment because we're on board with Väinö Kymmenen, getting up alongside Lewis Hamilton, who has led a lap of the race, but he's not going to lead for much longer because up into the lead into Primera corner goes Väinö Kymmenen, and at the same time, Romain Grosjean taking 4th place off of Daniel Ricciardo. And what else is happening? Magnussen being passed by Alessandro Farina, or is he? They're still side by side going through the rest of the first series of corners. Now then, the back straight into, I think it's called VIP, the VIP hairpin. And you can see Alonso now next to challenge Lewis Hamilton, who is already starting to drop back. He has a heavier fuel load, so he could be 2-stopping, and Kymmenen and Alonso may be 3-stopping, but that could play to Hamilton's hands because it's a very long pit lane, and if the pit lane speed limit is the same as last season, a slow 60 kilometres an hour rather than the slightly less slow 80 kilometres an hour, then the 2-stop is a better strategy to go for because you run less time in the pit lane. It's about half a minute to 35 seconds, the pit time loss. So if Kymmenen is 3-stopping, he needs to pull away pretty quickly. Now, there's a bit of breaking news about this circuit, actually, about this race, because it may actually be dropped from next season's calendar. It does have a place, but for reasons not known yet, we may not see it next season. I suspect this could be down to the pit exit, because there was a moment last season when Nico Hülkenberg made his final pit stop, and the pit exit is such that you take a very acute angle into a sharp yet fast right-hander, and the racing line is a lot faster, and there was a point where Hülkenberg was nearly rear-ended by Valtteri Bottas. The ass-man. Almost fitting, really. So we may actually see some shenanigans in the pit lane exit in this race. We'll have to find out in due course, but for the moment we're only on lap 3, and at the moment it is Väinö Kymmenen, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, who we're on board with, and behind is Romain Grosjean. Romain Grosjean also looking pretty quick. Worth mentioning, the Sunday warm-up, Max Verstappen was actually 4th quickest in that Willows, so he may have a bit of race pace in this race. He's already up to 17th place, ahead of Magnussen and Hülkenberg. Those two are former teammates, Magnussen and Hülkenberg, last season. These days, Hülkenberg is toiling at the back in a Gajera which hasn't really worked this season. Another new fastest lap for Kymmenen, and Kymmenen's teammate getting up alongside Fernando Alonso into Primera corner, and Grosjean is very light on fuel, so I think he must be 3-stopping as well. So Tornadoes need to make the most of this strategy. As we cycle through Hamilton back to Grosjean, and then back to Alonso. Is Alonso in this slipstream? Can he do something about Romain Grosjean? The word is that Shake and Bake are now focusing on aero development for next season. They're sticking with their 17 car, so any aero parts will be going on this very car, which will be an ASS 17B next season. And then dropping down, this will be through Craig Jones' corner. I've forgotten some of the corner names, unfortunately, so I'll have to refer to them by guesswork. But I know there's a Craig Jones, there's a Sagres, there's a Galp, and then there's also a Samsung corner. Some of the corners are marked on the bleachers, which are the open grandstands that you can see on the outside of the circuit. That might help me out. Let's see what's happening to the rest of the order. It's remained unchanged so far. Clark is in 6th ahead of Lee. Now we go to Grosjean versus Hamilton into VIP corner. Grosjean getting up alongside at the inside and forcing his way up into 2nd place. And not for the first time this season, we have a Tornado 1-2. Switch back on board to Lewis Hamilton, who gets it wobbly and is off the track. And back on it pretty quickly, but now he's under pressure from Fernando Alonso. So that was an interesting little error that Lewis Hamilton made, and you can see he's still a bit uncertain about the car. Going through Portimao, he's off again, and there's contact between Hamilton and Alonso. Light contact, no damage, but Hamilton really struggling with his car, and as this first stint goes along, maybe his qualifying setup is starting to unravel a little bit. Back on board with Alonso. Can he repeat the manoeuvre that Grosjean did? Up the inside into VIP. That is third place for Fernando Alonso. Next on Hamilton's rear end will be Daniel Ricciardo in the Andrew, who is not doing too badly at the moment. And I'm having a look. Gonzalez has taken Bryant as the other CBA is pulling off the circuit with mechanical trouble. So that's Kimi Raikkonen. No repeat of his Monza podium. And he's out of the race. That's a loose wheel. That's unfortunate. So he's pulled off about Samsung corner. Has got some side-by-side action. Hamilton losing another place, this time to Daniel Ricciardo. Now next is James Clark. James Clark going head-to-head with his fellow Brit Lewis Hamilton. As we switch to a Gajera, that's Alessandro Farina looking at the other Mitchell of Sebastian Vettel. Mitchell's not very quick at all in this race, certainly in the early stages. Let's see if he can make the overtake. So, if Portimao is to be dropped from next season, what sort of candidates can we see next season as a replacement? The obvious choice, well, see Clark making the move on Hamilton up to 5th, Hamilton losing a place, and Vettel about to lose another place to Farina. Then there's more side-by-side action in front. Is that Vettel versus Sainz? I think it's Vettel versus... Well, Farina's just past Vettel, so who's in front of Farina? It's Perez versus Sainz. That's the duo in front of the Italian from Sicily, originally, then moved to Milan when he was younger. A little bit of history of Alessandro Farina as we go on board with Verstappen chasing and overtaking Carlos Sainz for 15th place. So the Willows showing its pace that from warm-up, and it's one of the quicker cars on the circuit. Now we switch back to Farina, making a move on Nolan Bryant into VIP, but Bryant braking a bit later and holding on to 12th place at the moment. Out goes Mattia Alfonsi. Alfonsi scored a point last time out at Monza. Interestingly, he was in the pits on the penultimate lap, and the timing line, he shouldn't have had that point actually. He should still have been a lap down, as we see Verstappen forcing his way through past... Is that Sainz again? Yeah, that must be a different overtake. Maybe Verstappen dropped behind Sainz on that previous lap and has had to do that move all over again. Now we've got a pit stop approaching for Roman Grosjean. So, potential candidates that could replace Portimao if Portimao is dropped next season. The obvious one seems to be the Nürburgring. That's a reliable little race. Very frequent race, and was dropped for this season but could return. What else have we got? We could have Barcelona or Jerez. That was actually discussed, the Jerez race, to replace Aragon for next season, but Aragon held on to the Spanish Grand Prix for now. But Jerez could return as a European Grand Prix. We could see a Dutch Grand Prix for the first time next season at Zandvoort. And we had a test session at Zandvoort mid-season. That was before the German Grand Prix. Some more left field suggestions that I was thinking of. We could have a second US race at Sebring. We had an FF1M race there recently for the first time, and maybe FF1M could trial it for one season. And by the way, the pit lane speed limit is 80 kilometres, so it is a quicker pit lane compared to last season, so maybe the 3-stop won't be as bad. Roman Grosjean coming out of the pits and rejoining a fair bit down the order because it is a long pit lane. And you can see that tight inside line, and you can see Stoffel van Dorn versus Nico Hulkenberg, and they're right up the back of Grosjean. Now, who's that ahead of Grosjean? It is Kevin Magnussen in the FJR, and there was another pit. I think it was Max Verstappen coming into the pits, and here's another one, James Clark. Here's a silly suggestion that could replace Portimao. We could have the European Grand Prix at Oulton Park, then James Clark can have pretty much a home race, because he's from Altrincham, Greater Manchester, which isn't that far away from Oulton Park, but yeah, that's a very silly suggestion. Another one that's popped into my head, you could have Watkins Glen, maybe, as the other US race, Daytona, with that infield section, or maybe an Oceanic Grand Prix you could have at Surfers Paradise or Bathurst. But I think one I'd be interested in most is an Argentine Grand Prix around Potrero de los Funes, which is a street circuit that encircles a lake. Have a look at an onboard lap of that because it is quite a nice circuit to look at. And there is a version of that on GP4, but I have no idea if it's any good. As into the pits from the race lead goes Väinö Kimminen. And Kimminen looking good already, even though it's only lap 16. Got a big lead over Fernando Alonso, who I think is going to come into the pits as well. They had very similar fuel loads. So could we see Daniel Ricciardo leading the race briefly? As out of the pits in 7.3 seconds goes the tornado of Väinö Kimminen, looking for his 5th win in a row. The record, I think, is 6 wins in a row. That was by Lewis Hamilton from 2011 and 2012. Out of the pits, 7.3 seconds, Daniel Ricciardo takes the lead of the race because Alonso is in the pits, and Ricciardo still got plenty of fuel, so he's definitely stopping in this race as Valtteri Bottas comes into the pits. And such was the lack of pace of Hamilton that Kimminen is already ahead of Lewis Hamilton. Well, rejoined ahead of Lewis Hamilton. So, yeah, that Mitchell is not going to score many points, and that'll pretty much decide the team's championship. So, as we look at one of the Gajieras, it's Alessandro Farina, who briefly runs up in 6th place behind Sergio Perez, but about to come into the pits at the end of this lap through the left into the final left-hander of the circuit before going into Sagres corner. And it's a 180-degree right-hander, which opens up at the exit. And through Galp, Ricciardo starts another lap. Kimminen is 3.4 seconds behind, and it's going to be a pit stop race between Sergio Perez and Alessandro Farina, and then there's another car in front of Perez, which must be Jean-Eric Vergne, because there were 3 of them together out the circuit. Indeed, it is Jean-Eric Vergne who has the first garage, so he has the advantage. Farina next, and then GRM right in front of the Gajiera. So who can turn around their driver quickest? So definitely a 3-stop strategy for Farina, as Vergne comes out first, Farina comes out second, and Farina has jumped Sergio Perez in this round of pit stops. Even though it was a decent pit stop for Sergio Perez, he had to wait. So, pit lane exit, Farina is okay, and Sergio Perez behind. Just about okay as well, but he's got his teammate Valtteri Bottas, who has pitted already. So 2 GRMs, both on 3-stop strategies, running together, and they're 15th and 16th, but still got drivers who need to make their first pit stops. They include race leader Daniel Ricciardo, 3rd place Hamilton, 4th place Bryant, 6th place Hülkenberg, and 8th place Caracciola. Now, Caracciola could have had a podium last time out at Monza. She was running ahead of Väinö Kimminen before her Judd engine grenaded itself. Magnussen could have had a podium inherited, but his Judd grenaded itself. No Judds finished in the previous race at Monza, which will not do their development any good whatsoever. And that'll be the reason why FJR have turned their ERS off for the remainder of the season. Although Judd have brought another ERS upgrade for this race. That's the 4th and final free upgrade that they've got for this season. Possibility that FJR may take another upgrade before the end of the season and take the qualifying penalty. Last time we had a qualifying penalty was 2002. The upgrade that Judd have brought, mostly ERS, but a little bit of ice and control electronics, as back into the lead once again goes Väinö Kimminen. Didn't even need to wait for Ricciardo to pit because Kimminen just went straight for it. Hamilton looks as if he's on a 2-stop strategy, so he's mirroring his strategy from last season. And at the moment he is back up to 3rd, but it's not a particularly well set up Mitchell that he's got. Mitchell looking just for pole positions for the rest of the season, by the looks of it. And if there was a qualifying championship, Hamilton would be leading it because he has 6 pole positions this season, but you only get points for the races. Into the pits comes Lewis Hamilton. Now, next season we'll have 13 teams, but only 11 can race, so there's going to be a pre-qualifying system for next season. And the way it's going to work, all teams are going to have to qualify. In the past, You used to have the bottom 10 or 11 so teams, as Hamilton being held up by Hülkenberg coming into the pits. Excuse me for interrupting myself, but yes, there's going to be 2 separate groups. There's going to be a group of 7 and a group of 6. They'll all take part in a qualifying session, and the bottom one from each group will be eliminated for the rest of the weekend. So that's how next season is going to work. So Tornado may be dominant at the moment, but next season they're going to have to qualify, and that'd be a turn up if a Tornado fails to make the grid next season, but very unlikely. So we're looking at... Oh, that's a shake and bake, and it's Fernando Alonso in trouble once again. So, even though shake and bakes have apparently turned their ears down, they're still suffering from unreliability. So, Fernando Alonso out of the race, and it looks as if it's a suspension failure looking at the right rear. Now, is it suspension or is it puncture? We'll find out shortly. But here comes a marshal to retrieve the shake and bake out of harm's way. It is a puncture, so out goes the Firestone. Into the pits comes Daniel Ricciardo, so that was probably from second, but Romain Grosjean now back up to second place in the race, and fuel load, definite 2-stop strategy, came in at the end of lap 23, so bang on, and splitting his strategy into 3 very even chunks, pretty much, as Caracciola comes into the pits. As out the pits and getting right in the way of Max Verstappen goes Ricciardo, and Ricciardo now has a big queue of cars behind. But the queue's actually being headed by Thomas Gonzalez. So Gonzalez takes 5th place for the moment. And actually the time loss, now that the pit lane speed limit has been raised to 80 kilometres an hour, nothing like as bad. So I think Ricciardo's losing about, call it 25 to 30 seconds, probably closer to 25. You can see Gonzalez, having made that earlier pit stop, has worked out pretty well for him, but he's going to come under pressure from a load of fresh-tyred cars. They include Daniel Ricciardo, but Gonzalez keeping his line in check going into Primera. But not keeping it in check enough, because up the inside, trying to goes Ricciardo, but Gonzalez holding on to that one for now. Gonzalez 3-stopping, so he needs to do something about his race here. But Ricciardo's going to do something about that right into VIP, brake very late, or Gonzalez brake very early and still managed to lock up. So now Gonzalez has got Max Verstappen right behind him, Verstappen driving well in the Willows. But is his Judd engine reliable enough? Well, it depends on how much ERS Verstappen is using. He was quick in warm-up, so it looks as if Willows might have gone fairly aggressive on the ERS, but then again Van Dorn's down in 17th. But at least Van Dorn is still in the race. I have a few explanations as to why Van Dorn is so unlucky, and the best one I can think of is that when Van Dorn started racing... Oh, and Verstappen taking Gonzalez. That was... Gonzalez must have had a bad exit out of Primera, as out of the race goes James Clark. Can he make it into the pits just in time? Not quite, but mechanical problems for the other AJ, so both AJs out, and that won't do their Hart engine much good. Jean-Eric Verne 7th, challenging Thomas Gonzalez for 6th place. Yes, Van Dorn, so my theory as to why Van Dorn is so unlucky is that when he first started in FF1M, they ran out of racing gods, so they was instead assigned with Racing Lucifer. And when he was leading at Estoril in 2015, they thought, nah, you're not having that one. Bang goes your engine. And it's confirmed as a suspension failure for James Clark. Cooper Lee's managed to get himself up to 3rd place. How's he managed that? We've obviously pitted a bit earlier, and he's used his newer tyres to gain track position, so Cooper Lee having a cracking drive, and Gonzalez is all over the place, because now he's about to lose place to Farina. So, very strange driving from Thomas Gonzalez at the moment. Not sure why he's taking those lines. Maybe this was the issue that the AFIA were referring to, and look at in the background, I think that was Lewis Hamilton nearly getting rammed into by Sergio Perez. As Farina takes that 7th place off of Gonzalez, but he's going to come straight into the pits at the end of this lap. Kiminen in the pits as well, so I was wondering what he was doing in second, but The explanation for that is in the pits, but Tornado's again running riot because they are miles ahead of the rest of the field. And they're keeping this car for next season, so everyone's going to have to just do better. Now, at the inside here, that's Hulkenberg versus Bryant for 6th place. And look at that, Bryant doing the same line as Gonzalez and losing that 6th place to Nico Hulkenberg. Hulkenberg driving well, and Caracciola's doing quite well as well in this race. She's managed to get herself up to 8th place. I think that's partly because of the 3 stoppers taking effect. And she is on a 2-stop strategy. And looking at Nolan Bryant's 7th place, but taking a bit of caution as coming up to the pair of them is Max Verstappen. And Max Verstappen is about to make an overtake on Caterina Caracciola for 8th place down the main straight. Willow's probably running hers, FJR running none, and that is the difference. Verstappen can take the racing line before turning into Primera. Now he's going up for Nolan Bryant's 7th place. Be careful, because that could end in contact, but Verstappen definitely the quicker driver at this stage compared to Bryant. On the 3-stop strategy is the Willows, and doing very nicely. And in front of Bryant is Hulkenberg, so if Verstappen can get past on this lap, now let's see the power difference between Megatron and Judd. It looks pretty even, but Verstappen's going to be later on the brakes into Primera, and he's going to take that 7th place. But taking that strange line once again, so he needs to pull away at the exit of these 2 corners, otherwise he's going to come under pressure going into VIP. But I think Bryant himself is going to come under pressure from Caracciola. Not quite. Bryant's a bit defensive, but now then. I think Werner's taken Caracciola somewhere, and he's going to do the hash of that corner. But Verne taking 8th place. As we go into lap 40, and it's Väinö Kimminen who remains in the lead. Champion-elect Väinö Kimminen, he's got a healthy lead, and he's going to be even healthier if it stays like this. How big is that lead? Waiting for Grosjean, 14.9 seconds is the lead between those two, but Grosjean was quicker on that previous tour. And who is the 3rd fastest driver? It's actually Sainz. Sainz, however, is nearly a lap down because Perez didn't even complete that lap and Kimminen was already starting another. So this is Hulkenberg versus Verstappen now for 6th place. And right round the outside, I'll be impressed if he can pull that one off, and it looks as if he has. What a move from Max Verstappen round the outside of the corner after Craig Jones. And Verstappen's going to be at it again, or is this Lee on the move against his former teammate Lewis Hamilton into Primera? Now then, that wasn't expecting that before this race. And certainly after Lee's dismissal or driver swap with Sebastian Vettel, who, by the way, is down in 16th place. Vettel having an awful race in the Mitchell. I mean, there were some question marks and some eyebrows raised over the swap between Lee and Vettel and the apparent dream team between Hamilton and Vettel, but Mitchell have basically just gone backwards as the season has gone along. And here's more evidence of that because Hamilton is going to lose 5th place to Max Verstappen going through Primera corner. So Verstappen now up to 5th. And where's Hamilton gone? He's made another pit stop and he's rejoined in 15th, but he has made all his pit stops. That is at least one saving grace and an otherwise porridge of a race. As Hulkenberg, having also made a pit stop, is now battling with said Lewis Hamilton through the first couple of corners. And that is going to be 15th place for Hulkenberg, whose next target is Kevin Magnussen. As Cooper Lee is going to come into the pits from 3rd place for his final pit stop. He'll lose that to Daniel Ricciardo. But I think his race has been cracking. I've got no other word for it. It's been a cracking race for Cooper Lee, who doesn't have a race next season, which is a bit of a shame. On go a new set of hard, good years. You can tell because of the white wall. And he's having to wait because Max Verstappen is coming into the pits as well. As is Jean-Eric Vergne. So more pit stops are happening. I think Caracciola made her final pit stop and has rejoined just behind Lewis Hamilton as Väinö Kimminen comes into the pits. Well, I've had no problems with the pit exit as of yet, so I think the issues are basically the racing line through the first couple of corners. Maybe it could be rectified and Portimao can stay on the calendar because it's a good little circuit. But if the problems are as such, then yeah, this could be FF1M's last race at Portimao for a bit. Alessandro Farina comes into the pits for his final pit stop, and at 7 seconds and enough fuel to go to the end of the race. And the pit lane speed limiter goes off as Thomas Gonzalez comes into the pits. And Farina rejoining, where's he rejoined? 9th place. That's ahead of Jean-Eric Vergne, behind Sebastian Vettel, but we're getting his line all wrong there. And Jean-Eric Vergne up the inside. Can he make that move stick, or can Farina hold on with his fresher tyres? He can indeed. So, well, hang on a second. I'm nearly spoken too soon, because here comes Jean-Eric Vergne into VIP corner. And up to 9th place goes Jean-Eric Vergne. And who has yet to make a final pit stop? Well, here's Väinö Kymmänen, and he's on lap 62 at the moment, and he's got a half a minute lead over Roman Grosjean. This has just been another domination from the Finn, who looks as if he's going to be on course to take a championship, and it'll be well deserved if he does. Driven well all season, very few mistakes, and genuinely just been the faster driver. And who have we got? We've got Roman Grosjean in second at the moment, ahead of Daniel Ricciardo, who's used his two-stop strategy well, because he's in 3rd place. Did start 5th on the grid, so the Andrews were pretty quick in general for this meeting. And Väinö Kymmänen, he's doing that strange line as well, so yeah, we've got some very unusual driving going on at the moment. We've got both Gajeras in the top 8, so their poor qualifying, they've been focusing on their race setup, so Farina 7th, Hülkenberg 8th at the moment. So that'll be useful points for them if it stays like this. Cooper Lee in 4th. Got to be candidate for drive of the day with the season Pedersen have been having, but Verstappen's got to be up there as well. He's in 5th place. How far behind Cooper Lee is he? Going through Craig Jones' corner. We got Jean-Eric Vergne in 6th. And this looks to be, well, with neither Mitchell in the top 8, I think it's fair to say that the Teams Championship is going to be decided. Still got a few more laps to go, but we'll just wait and confirm that one. Verstappen, the fastest driver on the circuit in the last tour. And who else have we got? Hamilton down in 9th, so once again, pole position out of the points for Lewis Hamilton, it seems. And Caracciola's not done too badly. She's up in 10th. No points on course for FJR, but at least all of their Judd runners, all 4 of them, are still in the race. And the highest of which is Verstappen in 5th. Caracciola 10th and Van Dorn and Magnussen 17th and 18th. So Magnussen's 3-stop strategy really hasn't worked, and he's actually last out of all the runners at the moment. 4 retirements, and they are James Clark, Fernando Alonso, Mattia Alfonsi and Kimi Räikkönen, so 2 Hearts and 2 Megatrons not working well. The lead just extending a little bit between Kymmänen and Grosjean, 33.2 seconds, and Ricciardo 43.2 seconds off of race leader Väinö Kymmänen. And it looks pretty much set until the end of the race. We've only got one more lap to go after this one. And who else? Well, who else has been happening? Well, both GRM's not performing great in the race, both on 3 stops. Perez 12th and Bottas 16th. And who else is there? Nolan Bryant 11th. So I think that's evidence of Shake and Bake turning their engines down, but even so, it's not done Alonso too much good. We are now on the final lap of the race, and still Kymmänen taking that unusual line through the first couple of corners. But it's made no difference to his race pace, as he is way out in the lead. Approaching some traffic, that's Farina, who is the last driver on the lead lap. Just in front of him is Jean-Eric Vergne, and then just in front of him is Max Verstappen. Only half the lap to go now. And about to exit Samsung, going through Craig Jones' corner. Grosjean was a little bit quicker on that previous tour, Not by much, only 0.2 of a second. And that was where Nico Hülkenberg pulled out of the race last season due to a gearbox problem, and costing an FJR double podium because Magnussen was running third at the time, inherited second, but Lewis Hamilton had inherited the win. But nothing inherited about this one, because out of Sagres and then through the Galp corner goes Väinö Kymmenen, and this is going to be 5 in a row for the flying Finn. Väinö Kymmenen securing the team's championship for Tornado, along with Romain Grosjean, who will come home in second place. And that's 3 in a row for Tornado in their illustrious career. Congratulations, Tornado. 7th career win for Väinö Kymmenen. Had 5 in a row, had 2 earlier this season. Had his first win at Aragon, and then another one at Road America, and then has begun his streak. When did he begin his streak? It was the race after Silverstone, that was Hungary. Daniel Ricciardo taking third, and a deserved podium for himself in the Andrew, using his 2-stop strategy well. But candidates for drive of the day, we've got Cooper Lee in 4th and Max Verstappen in 5th. Good drives from both. And then John-Eric Verne taking 6th, so it's a double points finish for Andrew Racing and a double points finish for Gajera. Alessandro Farina 7th, ahead of Nico Hülkenberg in 8th. Completing the top 10, Lewis Hamilton and Caterina Caracciola. And here you can see the second half of the field. You can see the other shake and bake of Nolan Bryant's there in 12th place. Sebastian Vettel 14th in what has been a pretty poor day for Mitchell, unfortunately. Gonzalez down in 15th, so his strategy didn't work out in the end, despite running 5th after his first pit stop. Maybe his strange lines taken was what did him there. Last, Kevin Magnussen. That is not a common sight. And you can see the Drivers' Championship, and the gap is now 36 points. That's basically 3 race wins in his pocket, the gap between Kymmenen and Grosjean, and it's now whittled down between those two. And Kymmenen can very easily win it in the next race. Hamilton 3rd, Alonso 4th, and Ricciardo 5th. And then any movers or shakers lower down, we've got Alessandro Farina in 10th now, in the top 10 in what has been a decent season for himself. And Tornado, 200 points with 4 races to go. And the record, 230, that was by Shake and Bake from the 2009 season. It's 100% doable for Tornado to break that record. And further back, Willows moving up to 9th, staying in 9th actually, ahead of Pedersen. And Gajera on 8th in the championship, closing up to CBA. So that is a battle yet to be decided. That concludes the final European race of the season. We'll head over to Southeast Asia for the Malaysian Grand Prix, which will take place at Sepang. So we shall see you for then.